today we have speaking with us James Hygate, who's the founder and CEO of Greenfuels, which is one of the leading distributed scale biodiesel and advanced biofuel company. James, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to India Global Business today. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Great, thank you. No, me too, me too. It's really exciting the work that we're doing in India and how we're as a company expanding sort of globally at the moment.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into that, James. But I thought before we could jump into the MOU that you've just signed, we could talk a little bit about what biodiesel is. Now, Greenfuels is one of the leading players in the biofuels industry. In fact, your MOU with the Indian company, which we'll talk about in a second, is about biodiesel. But could you just give us a little bit of a synopsis for our readers who might not know what a biodiesel is, about what Greenfuels are and what's so special about them?
Sure. So basically, biodiesel is a fuel that's made from a biological or a biogenic carbon source. So biodiesel is typically made from plant oils or animal fats, etc. As a company, we've always been focused on waste oils. So cooking oils that you would get from restaurants, canteens, fish and chip shops, food processing facilities. It's been around for some time. In fact, Greenfuels I founded almost 18 years ago now, in 2000, very beginning of 2003, and that was really through a desire to run my own vehicle on a zero carbon fuel, and that was the that was the drive behind it, and it's developed into a business where we've now supplied technology to over 80 countries. As a company, though, we see a big opportunity in moving into the fuel production side at scale, and specifically actually in India at the moment. There's some really good reasons to be working there.
Thanks, James. Because I have to admit, I didn't know what a biodiesel was. So now I know, and I'm sure our viewers will appreciate that as well. While you were talking, I was trying to understand the concept a bit more. So there's a lot of, it's not just about sustainability, but there's also this idea of recycling is in there when you're using cooking fuel. So could you talk a little bit about your MOU with the Indian company, which is Aris Bioenergy, and could you tell us a little bit about how this whole cooking oil equation is coming into that MOU, please?
Sure. So basically Aris Bioenergy are a well-established collector of used cooking oil in India, focused in Mumbai and Pune at the moment, but expanding out from there. So it was important for us to work with local businesses to have access to this feedstock. The waste oil collection industry is relatively new in India. It's been brought about through a government scheme called RUCO, which is Repurpose Used Cooking Oil Initiative. The driver behind that was that the used cooking oil was going back into the food chain. So the restaurants, the guys in the restaurant would be going outside and selling it to somebody else who may then be using it for cooking again, and that was going on and on. But obviously it becomes it will gradually become more poisonous over time, and so it's right for it to go to beneficial use, or it was simply being disposed of to drainage. So the waste oil collection companies, recycling companies, have now become established in India to collect this oil, and biofuels is now sort of the main outlet and the main use of this oil. So if you look at the European Union, for example, when I started 18 years ago, very little, if any, biodiesel was produced at that point. Now there is billions of litres that's produced, and any diesel you buy anywhere in Europe will have a percentage of biodiesel in the fuel, and actually the percentage at the moment is 7%. So people don't even realise, but 7% of the fuel they're buying is biodiesel. The Indian government have put a 5% mandate in place in India. So suddenly there is this huge demand for fuel. And this huge opportunity to recycle the cooking oil into fuel, and so that's kind of why we're there. And we've partnered with Aris Bioenergy. We've known them for some time, and they've got a very well-established and appropriate collection business, which we believe can be scaled together across the country.
And how does this, I'm trying to understand, so how does cooking oil go to become biodiesel? What's the process? Or is that super secret and you can't share that?
No, it's a known process, although obviously our equipment is the best way of, the most efficient way of doing it. But it's a known process called transesterification. But in very simple terms, you're making an oil molecule smaller and to have more similar properties to a fuel molecule. So your vegetable oil is something called a triglyceride, kind of looks like this, and we chop these fatty acid chains off and bind a smaller alcohol, a methanol, to it to form something called a methyl ester. But in real simple terms, we're turning a big molecule into 3 smaller molecules, and the properties are very, very similar to fossil fuels. And if you think what fossil fuels are, well, it's just decomposed plant matter over millions and millions of years, pulled out the ground and refined. Well, we're effectively taking that, almost that source, so almost directly from the plants, or in our case, directly from the waste that's come from the plant. So it's not too different when you look at it, really.
You mentioned, James, that the Indian government has put in a 5% mandate. Now that's, I mean, obviously 5% doesn't sound a lot, but it's 5% of, say, 1.3 billion people.
Yes.
The production of it, just that's a huge market. And I was wondering, since you've already made a foray into the Indian market, what are your thoughts on, India is obviously making this massive push towards clean energy. What are your thoughts on how biofuel sort of fits into that whole sort of push?
Well, yeah. So actually, the push in the policy in India is really, really good. It's very clever, and for a few reasons. Firstly, currently there's lots of used cooking oil that gets, because it's now a big industry globally, but specifically in Europe and North America. Used cooking oil has been collected from lots of countries, in India before, and also China, Southeast Asia, etc., and then shipped all the way around the world to Europe, where it's used in biodiesel production. And what you're seeing is, biodiesel is a very clean burning fuel, very low particulates, it's effectively a net zero carbon fuel. You're seeing the benefit, the environmental benefits of that waste being used elsewhere in the world. The Indian government put in place a ban on used cooking oil exports. So essentially it's a walled garden. So India now saying, okay, we now have this resource that we need to use internally. So that's one side of it. The other side of it, they say, well, actually, we've gone for a 5% mandate, but we don't want to be at the whim of fluctuating oil prices. So we're providing, we're telling the oil marketing companies that they have to buy it at a certain price, which is going up over the next few years, up to the volume to meet their 5%. And to put that in perspective, that's something like $8.3 billion worth of fuel. So it's a fairly significant market that's there. And so as a policy, fantastic. And so, essentially it's all about now getting as many of our plants out there as quickly as we possibly can to utilize that and help accelerate India moving to its green goals. And we'd love to see the same happen in other countries, because to me, it makes no real sense to be moving this commodity all over the world. If you can use it close to source, everybody needs fuel. So if you can use it close to source, you're seeing those benefits. And so it's fantastic. And it is going to be a significant contributor to the overall move towards net zero carbon, because it's the fuel, the carbon is fixed during the plant's growth. So effectively it's a net zero carbon fuel. There's no, a plant will grow, fixed carbon, you then will take a seed from it, crush it to oil, cook with it, turn that oil into fuel, burn that carbon, but then it's completely cyclic. So rather than a fossil fuel where you drill it out the ground, burn it, and it goes into the atmosphere, you have a cyclic process with used or even virgin oils. And so you can really see how that can provide a big environmental difference. And when you compare it to fossil diesel, where there's actually a huge amount of carbon, not only when it's burnt, but in its refining and its distribution and everything else, you can be saving, 2.5 kilos per litre of carbon. So we feel this will have a significant impact and make a really big difference towards India's green future.
Numbers are really fascinating, I have to say. I mean, when you put it in those terms, you can really tell what a huge difference this is going to make, and it sort of makes you think that, you know, why wasn't this done before? Like, you know, surely it's so simple, but as we all know, probably simple and the most obvious things often take time. So I am curious to know, what are the challenges? Are there any challenges that you foresee in this new trend? I mean, it's fantastic that everybody's moving towards green fuels, but what are the roadblocks?
Of course, there are a lot of challenges. I think you know, actually getting sufficient feedstock of a high quality is the challenge and the difficulty here. The processing side in our technology and the offtake and the blending from the oil marketing companies relatively straightforward, but it's really the front end work that the people like Aris Bioenergy are doing. So actually going out, collecting this oil, consolidating it, making sure it's suitable for use is the challenge in the area. I think in India there's probably a lot of the other challenges have gone away because of the policy, which I genuinely think is the right answer, and they should be doing it in other countries, because that oil resource is there and it's being contained within India, which I think is really, really important. But the other side is actually, growing as quickly as we can. This is still seen as very much a new industry. Even though we've been around for a long time, people still see this as a new technology, and there are, that's always a challenge getting established in markets. But again, I think where we've seen the market develop all over the world, really what we see in India, there's a big opportunity for us. Specifically around our technology as well. So if you look at the biofuels industry, most plants, most technology to make biodiesel is like huge refinery scale, like oil and gas refineries, and they typically have to use very large quantities of virgin oil, so like palm oil or canola or soy oil, as well as used cooking oils. What we did very early on was scale that technology down to a size that sits within sea container size. So a typical facility of ours is like 20 tons a day. And if you look at the current collection in Mumbai, it's about 60 tons a day. I would imagine actually that's going to go up significantly as more of this oil is collected. But you can see how, around Mumbai, 3 of our facilities would currently process all of that used cooking oil that's collected. If we had one sort of 200 ton a day facility in somewhere in India, we'd have to pull oil in from all over the country to that centralized location. It's very difficult because whatever waste you look at, waste is distributed. It's kind of all over the place. It's not at an oil and gas scale. And we're starting to see, not only in India but in other countries, this sort of switch to say, well, do you know what, this probably should be more localized, put it at a smaller scale. We're not going to see this material, or we shouldn't be seeing this material move all over the world, because there is a local demand. And so we, as a company, not only for our own projects in India but elsewhere, have seen a massive increase in inquiries, in sales over the past couple of years, where people have sort of cottoned on to the fact that actually this is the right scale to be doing it. For us, huge advantage, because this is a scale we've been doing for close to 20 years. And so, we are the experts at it, that scale. And there's not really anyone else in that position. So yeah, it's a good place to be at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, from what you're telling me, it also sounds like what Greenfields is doing is got its base in innovation and research and development, because that just helps make things more localized, more easy, as opposed to moving tons of oil that needs to be processed around the world, which is almost counterintuitive. I mean, you're burning more fuels to sort of reprocess a used fuel. So do you think there's any lack in R&D and innovation that there needs to be more move towards it, or are there any hurdles towards this?
So we actually have a sister company called Greenfields Research, and we basically just sit and invent stuff day in, day out, and do all sorts of R&D innovation. I think on that side, not necessarily at the scale size, that kind of works, and that's a very well proven known technology, known process. If you look where we're focusing our efforts at the moment, is saying, okay, fuels for road use, for trucks, for generators, etc. Yes, that's where the market is for biofuels today. But the market for biofuels in maybe sort of 5 years' time is more likely to be moving towards transport modalities that are more difficult to decarbonize. So things like aviation and marine. So these are things that so road transport you can see moving towards electrification in the future, and genuinely I think that's the right thing to do. It's fantastic. But if you look at if you want to move something very big a long way, you need to have a fuel that's got an incredibly high energy density, and batteries are great, but they're really heavy, so you can't really use them for long haul flights or very large container ships, for example. Things like hydrogen, I don't know if you've seen a kilo of hydrogen, but it takes up quite a lot of space, even if you squish it down to a liquid form. Again, these are they're not really very well suited for aviation marine fuels. So for the past 13 years, we've been heavily focused our R&D onto how to use biofuels in aviation marine, and how the fuel should be used, how they should be made, and how they can be made sustainably from wastes. And that's where we see the future. And I can see the future in India in probably sort of 5 years or so time. For us as a company, actually, we'll be building refineries there to produce aviation fuels and marine fuels, and tying into the other facilities we set up for the road fuels across the country to pull into that to achieve those, to achieve decarbonisation in those transports.
Thanks, James. It's my final question to you.
Okay.
I just thought, talking more about India, and obviously India plays, and this is kind of sort of accepted all around the world because of the sheer size of its demographic. India is playing quite an important role globally as well, and how it sits in terms of its move towards sustainability, its drive towards going for renewable energy. And while I was reading up for this interview, I read a quote by you which I found really fascinating. You said, and I'm quoting you here, "Green Fuels views India as a pivotal player in its worldwide refining capability building program." Now, I was just wondering, how do you see India playing this role? Could you explain what you meant there in terms of how it can play this role?
Yes, because I think because of these changes in policy in India, it's it really is where the opportunity is currently for biofuels, and specifically with biodiesel. There is feedstock available, and it's truly sustainable feedstock, so that's great. It's from that side of it, it's perfect, and the demand side, it's perfect. So for us, we're looking at and we're planning over the next 5 years something like 20 facilities across the country, and these aren't sort of just dots in the map. At the moment, these are tied to sort of availability of feedstock, where we should be doing, etc. So for us, that's going to be the area of most rapid growth for us globally. And India's a country that I've been to probably every year for the last 15 years. And somewhere that we love, but it's also somewhere you can see where that can really benefit from this green revolution. There's a real will there to make this happen, and it can be done at a scale far greater than you can see in other parts of the world. And I think in this whole bioeconomy, India can lead the world in this. It's a real opportunity that's there. There's a real opportunity there to do it properly. I feel in maybe a lot of these sort of the early markets, because of the scale, because of maybe the skew towards using palm oil, for example, directly from areas that used to be rainforest, growing palm trees, and then using that for biofuel is not sustainable because you're deforesting for it. Whereas in India, actually, you are a huge user of cooking oil, and there's a huge amount of this waste that's available. It can be done the right way, and it can be done the right way for the market. So for us, it's pivotal for us as a company, and it's pivotal for us from the point of view of climate change. We think in the next 5 years in India alone, our contribution will be over 1 million tons of carbon saved, which is significant. If you look at the last 18 years of us as a business, the facilities we've sold globally, it's about 6.5 million tons of carbon that we've saved all over the world in almost 20 years, we can see getting to 1 million tons very quickly in India and growing from there. So yeah, great opportunity, and it's where as a business we will be, we'll be focusing a significant amount of our efforts.
James, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed our chat today, and I've learned so much about green fuels as a company, and just in general fuels that are greener and better for the environment. And I'm really looking forward to following green fuels progress in India, and I hope we can catch up sometime for a follow-up to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I've really enjoyed it as well, and it's a very exciting times for sure. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, James.